I'd
So
say
you just kind of breezed through the fact that you got valley fever as an instructor.
And lost 40%.
And lost 40% of your lung, and it kills some people. And that was obviously a huge piece of you saying, because if you would have stayed in, you weren't allowed to do anything that had any kind of lung irritants, was the deal?
Yeah, so this was, I came back and went right into being an instructor. I had planned on, forwarding on to bigger and better things operationally, and I was out at Nyland, and I all of a sudden, just like any of us, after you shoot an AT4 or a Gustav round more than a couple of them, your chest's a little tight the next day. Well, I was, the RSO during 55 of them being shot, and so naturally, my chest is tight. And
that shouldn't be legal, by the way, as we found out. So just so anyone knows, a Carl Gustav or an AT4, but especially a Carl Gustav, it's the biggest boom. You're shooting a 84 millimeter rocket, and if you shoot 2 of them or 3 of them in a day, it's like you got punched in the head a bunch. But the problem is our instructor staff goes out there and they sit there and do, what'd you say, 55 in one day. That's not healthy, bro.
Oh, I know.
That is not healthy.
Yeah, and it was one of those things like, well, you're not shooting them, you're just standing there, so it doesn't count. It's like, okay, typical military genius, but so the next day, I expected my chest and lungs and head and everything to be a little sorer than normal. But it got worse, and it got to the point where 3 or 4 days after that, it was debilitating. It felt like you were standing on my chest, especially when I laid down. It got worse, and so finally they said, hey, you need to go to Balboa and hit the ER and see what the hell's going on. And so I went, and it took, based on, and I can't blame Balboa, based on what I told them. Naturally, they're assuming blast lung, type of issues, some sort of explosive type of damage, but it wasn't. What that did is it exacerbated what had already started, which was me having breathed in coccidiomycosis, which is a microscopic fungus that lives in arid climates, and it spreads through your lungs like mold. Where it gets dangerous and kills people is 2 things. One, your genetic makeup, you're predisposed to determine, how big of an impact it has. The other one is how much you're exposed to and how long it goes untreated. So I basically, it grows through your lungs like mold and spreads, but if it goes past that, if it disseminates past your lungs, then it goes into your blood, into your organs, into your bone, and then ultimately it'll get into your CSF fluid, or cerebral spinal fluid, and into your spinal cord and go up into your brain, and that's when it kills people. And so it's kind of like encephalitis that way. But so mine had disseminated past my lungs. There was a couple of hot spots in my chest, in my sternum, and in my chest bone, ribs, and whatever. And so when they caught it, they prescribed Lamisil, which is a toenail fungus medication, diflucan. But it's a lot harsher than Lamisil. It's fluconazole, and so long story short, I was on 28 times the amount that you would be prescribed for a bad case of toenail fungus, and I got down. So here's the irony: I had gotten up to 200 pounds prior to that, and then I got back down. I weighed 140 pounds at the end of it. I was on convalescent leave for 8 months. At the time, my chief was Ty Woods, from Benghazi. God rest his soul, awesome dude. But so I was working for him at the time, and he, just couldn't have been better. I mean, he checked on me, came by the house regularly. I couldn't do anything. Like, I slept 20 hours a day. It was like having pneumonia and mono at the same time. Lost a ton of weight. Got down to about 140. Finally, they had gotten the disease under control and got it to recede, but it lays in your bloodstream like malaria does or whatever. It lays dormant. So if I got pneumonia or leukemia or HIV or cancer or something that really immunosuppressed me, it could come back. And so it's always there. You always have antibodies there. But at the end of that, the infectious disease captain at Balboa sat me down. He's like, I would recommend a medical retirement for you right now. And he said, if you want to go that route, I'm not saying you have to, but that's what I recommend. And basically let me know what you want to do. And I was like, man, I've got a child my first child on the way. I have no college degree. He's totally caught me off guard. Like, I have no plan, And so I said, well, how can I stay in? He said, well, you got to stay away from lung irritants for a few years, honestly. He's like, to make as good a recovery as you're going to make, you've got to slowly get back into shape and put weight on. You got to take really good care of your lungs. I mean, stay away from harsh cleaning products, smoke, dust, everything.
Which is basically everything you do as a SEAL.
Yeah.
I mean, everything that you do. You're cleaning stuff, you're blowing stuff up, you're setting stuff on fire, you're shooting guns with lead, and it's just a disaster for your lungs.
Yeah. And so, really the only potentially logical choice was to go over to the center as a basic BUDS instructor. And so Bro, the master chief that I was working for at the time, can't say enough good things about him. He hooked me up and made a deal with the training master chief, and they sent me over there, and I spent 3 years there, which was an amazing experience too. And I honestly I've drawn a lot of lessons from being an instructor to both life and to training dogs, which I know we'll get into. But so it was neat to be behind the curtain there for a little while and see what the wizard saw, so to speak.